Welcome back to my channel. As you can see, today's video is going to be about postural reflexes. Whew, I just need to put a big sigh out there because when I was studying reflexes, I was so focused on just trying to cram visual images in my head with all of these integration numbers. This is going to be an overview, and it won't necessarily cover in depth all of the different reflexes and what they do exactly. But I tried to organize this in a way for you to have a broader understanding of the breakdown of these reflexes so that you can problem solve what would be considered primitive, what would be considered writing, and get a general idea and feel for how to organize this information. I spent quite some time pulling up different resources to figure out how these reflexes were organized, and I really couldn't find one clear answer. Reflexes are not black and white. A lot of people, depending on the source that you look at, will tell you different things. Start off with the ones that appear at 28 weeks gestation, and I will start with rooting. And rooting goes away at 3 months. So you know that this is going to be a very basic reflex because it's integrating quite early in life. So rooting, as simple as it is if you stroke one side of the face of the baby, they are going to turn their head towards that stimuli. And that is their way of figuring out, is there food over here? Typically that would be a mother's nipple. They're going to try to root and latch on. And one way to remember that this one ends at 3 months is the song is root, root, root for the home team. So you say root 3 times. So I think rooting reflex will integrate at 3 months. And the reflex right under is very similar. There is a suck swallow reflex. So obviously if you are placing a bottle or a finger, the child is going to try to suck in order to get food. So that is the suck swallow reflex, and that one integrates between 2 to 5 months. And after that, I want you to think about the developmental milestones that you know. Even if you just know a few, that's okay. But a lot of that really should be in your head when you're thinking about when these reflexes are going to be able to appear and disappear, because babies are able to sit up in a seated position independently around 6 months. At this next reflex, the traction reflex, you see that the integration happens from 2 to 5 months. And traction is when you have a baby that's lying on the floor and you hold up his or her arms to come up to a seated position. You're going to notice that their head lags. As they get older and reach 2 to 5 months, that head lag is going to disappear because they're going to be able to bring their head forward as their arms are being pulled forward. And that's going to make sense because if you think about it, they're not going to be able to sit independently until 6 months. So then you know that they don't have the ability to bring their head up and have that full control yet, which makes this integration less than 6 months. Remember, traction is that you are pulling the baby upright and attracting them towards you, and their head is going to come up. And moving on, we have the Moro reflex, and this is very common. This is the startle reflex, where if you drop the child while they are on their back, then they're going to have this like startle response as if like, oh my gosh, I need to catch myself. So at 4 to 6 months, that one integrates, and then that is what becomes our startle reflex when we are caught off guard or surprised. And that's basically that fight or flight reaction. The last two are the plantar and the palmar. So I remember palmar because it's related to your hand and the palm is in your hand. And that one is very simple. If you place an object that a child can hold, like a rattle, in their hand, they are going to grasp it and hold it. And that is going to go away at 4 to 6 months. And plantar, I think of you being able to plant your feet on the floor, and think of that as plantar is related to your feet. And this one integrates later in life. This one is at 9 months. And this is basically the way that we test for the Babinski sign, which you may have heard of. And what you do is you can take like a pencil, tickle the bottom of the foot. And when you do that, the normal response is for your toes to curl. Your toes should flex. But if you have a positive Babinski sign, that means that this plantar reflex did not integrate. So that is the end of everything that appears at 28 weeks. And then there are a few more under primitive. And once you look at these kind of in these groups, I feel like they're a lot easier to understand and reflect on, to be like, oh, okay, these are the really simple ones that happen and go away in the first year of life, which is why they're primitive. So at 32 weeks gestation, we have one called the gallant reflex. You want to remember it as the gallant spinal reflex because when the child is positioned with their face down and you stroke one side of their spine, the reaction is for the newborn to laterally flex their body towards that stimulus. And then moving on, at this point, we are already at birth because 37 weeks is birth, full term child. So these are the really common ones that I think everyone kind of struggles or knows that they need to study. And it is the ATNR, STNR, and the TLR. So the ATNR is the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. And this is well known as the fencer pose because this one is initiated by turning the child's head. So if they're laying on their back and you turn their head towards the right, if this reflex is still there, the side that you turn their head towards, so wherever their nose is pointing, they're going to point those limbs. So that's how I remember it. You point with the nose side. If you turn your head to the right, then your right arm and right leg are both going to extend straight out. And on the opposite side, both limbs will flex. So it works either way, you just reverse it. And STNR is symmetrical tonic neck reflex. So when you think symmetrical, think of both sides looking the same. Exactly what that means. So for this one, it's going to integrate later in life because this is going to help the child get ready to crawl and creep. And crawling takes place at 7 months and creeping takes place at 10 months. So then you know that this reflex is going to integrate between 8 to 12 months. And I drew a little picture. So for this one, the stimuli is either flexing the head down or extending the head up when you are in that creeping position. And if the child has not integrated this one, it's very hard for them to hold a creeping position, crawling. They look like they're like low tone and have muscle weakness is what it could appear like. And TLR is the last one. And this one was a little hard for me to organize because some people put it under primitive and some people will put it under writing. And that's because it's somewhat in the middle. And this is when some things really aren't black and white. But like I said, try to conceptualize and understand the reflex and what it does rather than getting really caught up on where does it belong. So the TLR will appear at birth. And there are two kinds. There is the forward, which is the flexion, and the backward, which is the extension. And these both integrate at 6 months. I have heard otherwise on other resources, but I'm following 6 months for this one. If the child is being held with their belly towards the floor, they're going to curl up their limbs, whereas if they're on their back, they're going to straighten out and hyperextend. These are a lot easier to conceptualize when you look at a video of it. So go ahead and look up lots of videos. There's so many on YouTube. I'm going to link this website from Tools to Grow OT, and they have a wonderful handout that explains TLR, ATNR, and STNR with pictures. So for TLR, I think about how the child is trying to orient their head in space depending on the position that they're in. So they're trying to kind of center their body with their head, which is why sometimes it may be categorized as a writing reflex. I'm going to split this video into two parts because Primitive took a very long time for me to edit and film. So please look for part 2 when it is available for the remaining reflexes, which will include writing and equilibrium. Good luck and take care.